Good morning, Dog Nation. I'm Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Meriwether Tharp. We are absolutely jam-packed here over the course of the next approximately an hour, maybe a little bit less if we can stay on a good pace here. Two great guests, Terrence Edwards as usual on a Thursday. A lot to talk to Terrence about. Also on today's show, a guy that actually formed a great partnership with Terrence Edwards at Georgia, former Georgia quarterback David Greene, going to be on hand today there as well. With David, we got a couple of important topics to get into, but also David and I are part of a fun event on Saturday, so we'll tell you more about that here as a part of the program today. David said some very interesting things. The David Greene portion of this we actually pre-recorded this morning, so I already know that's really good, and we'll give that to you here coming up in just a moment. As you can imagine, though, a lot of the other chatter on today's show going to relate to UGA recruiting and some very interesting stuff yesterday involving really one of the most talked about recruits here over the course of the next few days. That is KJ Bolden, the five-star athlete. He's a safety at Georgia, and he's looking ahead to an August 5th commitment decision. And yesterday, a little bit of mystery kind of added into this discussion. I'll give you some specific reasons why. Now, there's other kind of tangible reasons sort of like the UGA part of this, but maybe some reasons to kind of wonder, I wonder if there's some surprises in store here, or if all of this is kind of played out behind the scenes a little bit different than sometimes it has appeared that it might. I'll give you the facts. I'll let you make your own decision about that here coming up in a moment. So what do you say we get it started? It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Meriwether Tharp, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Meriwether Tharp, your source for Georgia divorce. Find them online at theatlantadivorceteam.com.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
One of the things I talked about the other day is the way it seems like recruiting's playing out in the 2024 cycle, where you don't have nearly as much mystery as you used to. Take a prospect like Dylan Raiola. Pretty much everyone knew who was coming to Georgia, and he did. Look at Justin Williams this week, the five-star linebacker. Pretty much everyone knew he was coming to Georgia, and he did. DeMarcus Riddick, until yesterday, a Georgia commit, pretty much knew everyone knew that he was likely to leave this Georgia class. Yesterday he did. More on that coming up, by the way, in a moment. That there's just a little bit less of the plot twists and the intentional swerves, the idea of, like, say, Hulk Hogan joining the NWO. We don't have as much of that in recruiting as seemingly we used to. But every now and then, you are kind of, forced to kind of take a look here at what sort of feels like a little bit of an old school recruiting story, where there is, I think, some legitimate, authentic mystery around a decision, and it's one in which I think a lot of Georgia fans, and boy, when I'm out and about and talking to folks, this is one of those conversations that comes up a lot. People are really intrigued by what's going to happen on August 5th when the five-star athlete, KJ Bolden from Buford, Georgia, he's a safety if he goes to Georgia, what kind of decision he is going to make. Now, yesterday, we had a really fun event. It was the very first ever Georgia High School Football Media Day. I was there. Our friends at Score Atlanta put it on, obviously as a part of those high school football broadcasts on Peachtree TV. Had a chance to be there and kind of represent there on that. I talked to a lot of really good coaches and players yesterday. That was a fun discussion. Had a chance to talk to, in one case, Georgia commit and Justice Terry, big, great-looking defensive lineman for the class of 2025. That was fun. Ethan Barber, a Georgia target for the class of 2025, a terrific tight end. That was a fun conversation there as well. So I had a chance to kind of interact with some guys yesterday. But while I was doing the show, before I was able to get over there for the Media Day event, the Buford Wolves also rolled in there as well. That means Dylan Raiola was there, his kind of debut, I guess, as a Georgia high school football player. KJ Bolden was there too. To give you an idea of how, like, sort of jam-packed we are on today's show, we got fresh content involving Dylan Raiola, but I'm going to probably save that for tomorrow just because we've got so much other stuff to get to, including the Bolden stuff here right now, because I just think it's that interesting. And I do think it's a little bit of what I'll think of as kind of a throwback recruitment where, the days of, there is mystery, there is intrigue. It sort of feels like a little bit of a soap opera, which I kind of like. I mean, I'm into that kind of stuff. Y'all know I kind of jokingly call myself a carnival barker. I mean, I just sort of like drama. I have a very high tolerance for drama pre-signing day. Once a player signs the letter of intent and, goes on campus, at that point in time, I'm ready for him to buckle his chin strap and get to work. But if you want to create some fun and entertainment prior to that, I'm all here for it. It is, after all, good content, which that's what we're in the business of hopefully providing. But the point is yesterday, KJ Bolden kind of talked about some stuff that would lead you to believe there are some interesting waves kind of rolling, maybe behind the scenes with his recruitment. Because one of the questions our Jeff Sintel asked, and by the way, if you want to hear the entire interview with KJ Bolden, because I cannot play you everything that Bolden said yesterday. I'm not even sure I can give you the full context of everything with Bolden from yesterday. But last night on Before the Hedges, presented by Kroger on those DawgNation video channels, you can see for yourself everything that KJ had to say yesterday. But there's a couple of things in particular I want to highlight here. You know, Jeff asked KJ about the process of making the announcement. It's a very interesting question of, you know, will you tell the coaches to, you know, where you're not going? Will you let them know that you're not going there, you know, or are you just going to kind of reveal this to the world on August the 5th? Because the other day we heard from Nate Frazier, the running back who Georgia's obviously chasing down right now out of the state of California. Frazier put out on Twitter the other day that he has been going through the process of telling some coaches, no, I'm not coming here. It seems like he is certainly getting ready to announce his decision if he hasn't already made that privately himself. So KJ was kind of asked this yesterday. You know, are you going to be telling folks how many people will kind of know behind the scenes? And KJ said something very interesting in terms of, you know, just how much he wants to try to keep this a secret right now. Now, before I play the clip, let me say this. This is a high school kid talking. You know, sometimes they don't speak quite as loud. There's a little bit of room noise here. So this isn't probably the world's best audio, but it's KJ Bolden talking about his recruitment from yesterday. Of course, you want to hear it. So listen to it, and then I'll kind of give you more context for what Bolden says about just how secretive he wants this process to be.
I really wanted it to be like a surprise. I don't really want nobody to know. Like, even the school I'm going to, I really don't even want them to know. I just want to commit and then everybody figure out that day.
What about family? They gonna know, or are they gonna be surprised?
Oh no, nobody knows. I'm just gonna be the only one to know. Me and probably like my cameraman or someone. Yeah.
So Bolden says there he doesn't want anybody to know the decision he's making. Doesn't want the coaches to know of the ones who were kind of pursuing him. He doesn't want his family to know. He says the only ones who are going to know this decision are going to be me and my cameraman. Now, cameraman over the years will tell you there have been a lot of commitment videos that got filmed that never saw the light of day because they were a commitment to a school the player didn't go to. I'm assuming that's not going to be the case here with Bolden. But Bolden says, I'm going to try to keep this really tight. This is going to be a very closed circle in terms of who gets to know about all of this. I don't even want my family or the other coaches to know the decision that I'm going to make. Now, that's an interesting statement. And yet for most Georgia fans, they would say, well, even with all of that, I still believe that KJ Bolden is coming to Georgia. I believe for the majority of our audience who watches or listens to this show, I believe they would say, I think that Bolden's going to go to UGA. In fact, there was even some stuff yesterday, whether it be, you know, almost said this during the interview, or I guess he gave some video that got shot. I wasn't there at the time, but there was some video that got shot where he kind of gave a go dogs on the way out the door that, you know, there were a lot of Georgia fans who were sort of led to believe that I think Bolden is going to go to UGA no matter how much he may say there. He wants to keep all this process secretive. And there is no doubt that KJ is more than happy to talk openly about his feelings about Georgia. He has visited there, I believe, far more than he's visited anywhere else. The proximity obviously helps with that. He talked yesterday about the fact that his new high school teammate, Dylan Raiola, has been recruiting him to come to Georgia. So there is certainly no absence of evidence that the Georgia-Bolden relationship is strong. In fact, KJ talked a little bit about that yesterday, his feelings on Georgia, his connection with Georgia, the push that he gets from Kirby Smart in particular. Here's more from KJ Bolden talking about that.
Georgia definitely made me a top priority on, you know, I think I went on the visit like 16 times. I think I heard that day. It's crazy, but they definitely made me a top priority. You know, every time I go up there, Coach Kirby, they make sure he have a meeting with me every time. Coach Frank, Coach Muschamp, they always make they sit me down, talk about the defense, talk about how they're going to use me and things like that. So.
Talk about the defense, talk about how they're going to use me. Also, he kind of talked in that same interview, and this is why you should actually go back and watch the full thing on Before the Hedges presented by Kroger, about the specific relationship he has with Kirby Smart, the fact that he knows that Smart's going to be there for a long time. You know, there are a lot of coaches that you're not quite so sure you could say the same thing for, and the fact that Kirby Smart has a ability to relate to him as more than just like the adult figure, the coach who's telling you what to do, but there's a little bit more of a personal connection he sort of feels with Kirby because of the fact that, you know, Kirby is still a relatively young guy, but also, you know, kind of just sort of has a little bit of a young vibe about him, and it seems like that's something that KJ Bolden really likes. So I'm not really in the prediction business when it comes to stuff like this. I'm not sure y'all would, you know, value my prediction all that much anyway. But if I did make the prediction, yeah, I do think KJ Bolden's coming to Georgia. But the caveat to all of this is when you got the player saying, go Dogs on his way out of the media day event, we've kind of heard that stuff before, and it's not always as predictive as maybe the casual fan might think that it might be. And undoubtedly, for those of us who probably spend more time on the internet sort of absorbing this information than we probably should, there is no doubt been a lot of chatter about Bolden and other places. Clearly, Ohio State thinks they're a factor in this. You got Florida State, who's, kind of rattling pots and pans down there in Tallahassee. They think they're a factor in all of this. So I guess my overall feeling here is that would I be willing to go on the record and state that I believe that KJ Bolden's coming to Georgia? Yeah, I do. I think that Bolden's coming to Georgia. Would I bet my mortgage on that? I probably would hold off on that. I'd be willing to ruin my reputation, but I'm not quite sure I'd be willing to risk my mortgage, if you get the point here when it comes to the KJ Bolden thing. And this is where we kind of lead ourselves to maybe the most interesting thing that Bolden said, overall yesterday. And if you take this at face value, I think it does cause all of us to, I guess, at least reconsider a little bit about how we think this Bolden recruitment's playing out. The fact that, KJ has admitted that even in the last couple of weeks here, some events have transpired that have caused him to kind of rethink the decision he thought he was going to make. So if you've been kind of steadfast with the belief that KJ Bolden is coming to Georgia, some of what Bolden said yesterday would maybe be a little bit eyebrow raising. Let me let you hear this for yourself, and then we can kind of judge what it all means. Once again, KJ from yesterday before the Hedges presented by Kroger.
That happened to me 3 weeks ago. I had a school. I was ready, and then I had talked to I had got the phone with one of the coaches that was trying to recruit me, and it just changed my mindset all over completely up. So it took me a lot longer time to think about the process, but now I'm starting to think. I'm starting to figure out how I got the one.
So what KJ says there is that he thought he had his mind made up a couple of weeks ago. Coach kind of got in his ear, gave him some sort of pitch or whatever else that apparently caused him to rethink the whole deal. Now you start trying to think, well, was it Georgia that he was a believer in? And was it one of these, Ohio State or Florida State, ne'er-do-wells who tried to kind of get involved there and kind of change this trajectory? I guess we're left to guess there on that. But it does certainly open the door, for the idea that hey, maybe behind the scenes this has been playing out with a little bit more mystery and intrigue than maybe some Georgia fans have sort of thought that it was. I mean, ultimately August 5th when KJ makes his decision, you're talking about one of the top 10 players in the country, by the way. Ultimately on August 5th when KJ Bolden makes his decision, I mean, there's going to be a lot of drama on this. A lot of folks really interested. Now, there's also, kind of the belief that the ultimate battle for KJ may extend beyond just this initial commitment announcement. But Georgia fans feel like they're in a good spot. You have to acknowledge that schools like Ohio State and Florida State, maybe Alabama, I guess possibly Auburn been a little bit of a factor in all this there as well. But pretty interesting insight there yesterday. No one denies the Georgia relationship between Bolden and the Dogs is very strong here, but you're led to believe based on the other stuff that KJ said. He likes the mystery, he likes the secrecy, and he's had some stuff that's kind of caused him to kind of cloud his judgment and kind of rethink what he was initially thinking. What does all this add up to? I guess on August 5th, we'll find out together. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We are presented today by Meriwether Tharp, and happy to have you with us no matter how you get to us today. Live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. We're on the radio at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref. We're available as a podcast, no matter where you get to us, Apple, Spotify, the world-famous DawgNation.com. And today is episode 1997. You don't care about that, but it's fun for us because we look ahead to Tuesday and the 1,000th episode of this program coming up on, if I'm doing the math correctly, that gets to Tuesday for episode number 2,000, which is kind of a cool deal for us. I like big round numbers. That is certainly a big round number. We've been doing this since August of 2015. Rarely ever miss a day. That's when we call it DawgNation Daily. And on Tuesday, we celebrate episode 2000. It's a fun thing. I'm excited about it. We'll try not to be, too self-serving and all that, but at the same time, I am truly very proud to have been able to be in this spot, although the studio has changed so much over the years, but I'm proud to be able to do all of that and continue doing that for what we hope in many thousands of episodes more into the future. By the way, I could not do it without great friends like Meriwether Tharp. Terrific sponsor, your source for Georgia divorce. Meriwether Tharp is terrific, but certainly we will be happy to acknowledge the divorce process itself may not feel terrific to you. Certainly the sort of set of circumstances that led you to that conclusion clearly has been, something that's probably been very heavy and weighty. And at Meriwether and Tharp, they respect that. They know that this is not something that you enter into lightly. This is not something that you enter into without full consideration of exactly how it's going to impact you, whether it comes to your finances, which obviously is a very important part of this conversation, relationship you have with your children. Clearly that's a big part of how the divorce process can impact you in a very real way. And at Meriwether and Tharp, they understand that. That's why they want to be your source for Georgia divorce. And listen, here's the thing you got to understand is that when it comes to getting through this, having a proper plan in place is the first step towards getting yourself to a satisfactory outcome. And that's what Meriwether and Tharp is all about, explaining options to you, walking through the ways in which the law can impact you in maybe ways you haven't even fully considered, because that's the kind of institutional knowledge and expertise you gain when the attorneys of Meriwether and Tharp go through cases like maybe yours thousands and thousands of times before. You just develop knowledge and you become acquainted with the intricacies of the law, and that's what our friends at Meriwether and Tharp provide. So please find them online, theatlantadivorceteam.com, theatlantadivorceteam.com. Meriwether and Tharp is your source for Georgia divorce. All right, so we got a couple of things coming up here in a moment. Two great guests today. It's David Greene later on, the former Georgia quarterback. Dave and I are part of a really fun event on Saturday where you get a chance to also meet the former Georgia coach Mark Richt. I'll tell you more about that in a little bit before we're done today. Also, one of my main reasons for wanting to have David on the show is he had some very personal interaction with Mike Bobo back when David was a player at UGA. David gives you good insight on that today and some stuff with the Georgia quarterback conversation, all that with David Greene coming up. Terrence Edwards, as per usual, on a Thursday there as well. We'll look forward to doing that. Let me also, while I have your attention, give you some quick housekeeping on this. Don't forget, we have ongoing right now our Celebrating Teachers event, courtesy of our friends at Kroger. So please go to DawgNation.com if you haven't done this yet and nominate a teacher to be one of our outstanding teachers. It's the week of August 7th. Each day that week, we're going to announce our outstanding teachers winners, courtesy of our friends at Kroger. And each teacher that wins is going to get a collection of 4 incredible gift cards, including $100 to Kroger and $50 to Home Chef and Bath & Body Works and Target. But the really cool thing is that not only are our teachers winners here, the nominators of those teachers, if the person you nominate becomes one of our winners, you're a winner there as well. You get a $50 gift card to Kroger and a DawgNation gift bag, which includes a T-shirt, some other cool stuff there as well. So that's like a $100 value in its own right. So the bottom line is that we're celebrating outstanding teachers. Our nominated teachers, those who win, get an incredible collection of gift cards. And if the teacher you nominate wins, you get a great prize there as well, collection of prizes as the nominator. So go to DawgNation.com. We're kind of coming down to the wire on getting these nominations in. We'll give you more update on that tomorrow. But go to DawgNation.com, get in on this, nominate a great teacher, and you yourself could be a winner there as well. We're excited about back to school. Our friends at Kroger are there too, so make sure you check out all the information on that. All right, now let's get back to the topic at hand here, UGA recruiting. Let's go around the DawgHouse. Presented today by our friends at ServPro. Georgia got some news yesterday, not unexpected if you've been listening to the show and kind of around the Georgia football conversation for a while, but nonetheless, kind of a big headline. The fact that DeMarcus Riddick, one of the top linebackers in the country, as most folks kind of expected him to do, did decommit from Georgia yesterday as he made his pledge to Auburn. Now, later on in the program today, one of the things we're going to talk about here, and I'll show you the Riddick screen grab, the nice edit that he kind of put out of his commitment to Auburn yesterday. Kind of I don't know why Hugh Freeze looks weird to me in that picture. I guess there are a lot of photos in which Freeze looks pretty weird. But Freeze standing next to DeMarcus Riddick there seems a little bit strange to me. What was the old line? Was it like Suge Knight talking about, the producer wanting to be all up in the videos? Something about Hugh Freeze taking up half the space in DeMarcus Riddick's commitment announcement. Seems a little bit like that to me a little bit, but nonetheless, Riddick does commit to Auburn yesterday. Obviously a big deal for the Tigers, and I think a really big deal for the other in-state team in Alabama who did not get Riddick service. We're going to talk about what this means from a Crimson Tide standpoint before the show is done, but admittedly, Auburn got a big win yesterday. Georgia clearly would have loved to have had DeMarcus Riddick in the class. That's why he was a Georgia commit up until now. Now, obviously, Georgia has had a lot of irons in the fire when it comes to the linebacker position. They have seemingly known the Riddick thing was heading this way for quite some time. That may have been part of the motivation for getting the Justin Williams thing kind of closed out here this week. Huge announcement. Williams is as good a linebacker prospect as I've ever seen. I mean, he's just absolutely a bullet on the football field when it comes to pursuing the football, and you love everything about his frame and his size and everything else. This is just a really, really exciting prospect, the number one linebacker in the country for a reason, but Riddick's also really good too. So a lot of Georgia fans have been kind of left to wonder, well, what's next? What does this mean? Especially, you can always tell too when like an announcement like this comes in on Twitter, and I don't mean this is disrespect because fans are busy. People have got stuff going on. They don't inject this intravenously the way that a lot of us do. Not everybody's able to do that. So when you see Riddick leaving the class, for some people, this was new information yesterday. For some people, this was their first encounter with, oh gosh, Riddick's leaving here. What's going on? But the good news here is we have specific, tangible evidence that while some fans were caught off guard by this because they're just busy, they don't have time to keep up with everything that's going on, Georgia was not caught off by this at all. They have been talking to other linebackers very openly and very, very continuously that Georgia has been in its pursuit of other big-time linebackers with a very real awareness that DeMarcus Riddick was likely heading somewhere else. One of those guys is Chris Jones, 4-star out of the state of Virginia, and I kind of joked with some of our video audience about this before the regular show started, that right now Georgia's kind of involved with 2 linebackers from Virginia, both with the first name Chris. This is not going to end well for me. The idea that I'm going to be able to keep these 2 guys separated and not call one thing when I actually mean the other, there's very little chance that I'm going to get this right. This is not a very easy putt for me when it comes to 2 guys from the same state at the same position, both having the same first name. This is destined to be a comedy of errors for me at some point in time. But the point is Christopher Jones, one of those guys, was on with Jeff Sintel last night as well on Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. So if you were caught off guard by the Riddick news yesterday, if that's not something you expected to see, big-time prospect decommitting from Georgia and going to Auburn, rest assured that the Georgia coaches have been working past this and beyond this for quite some time. Jones told us that last night. Here he is with Jeff Sintel.
I'm not taking any more visits this weekend. The connection between me and Georgia have been pretty good. I just got off the phone with Coach Schumann last week, talking to him, about the DeMarcus Riddick situation and and just stuff moving forward. Yes, sir.
When you think about why Georgia is appealing to you, what sticks out here?
It's basically the same thing as last time. Just the development at Georgia is going to be second to none. Being coached under Coach Schumann, one of the best linebackers coaches in college football. So it's still the same thing.
Listen, I'm not going to say anything about Riddick as a player. I think he's an outstanding player. But it's important to note that when Riddick made the decision he made yesterday, within the circles of certain recruits, this was viewed as a very good thing. Some Georgia fans were kind of caught off guard, and they're like, well, is this bad news? How do you respond to all of this? Guys like Chris Jones says, if he don't want that spot, I do. At least you might be led to believe he might think that way. And Chris Cole might be kind of thinking the same thing, too. We'll find out more about their decisions when they're ready to make them. But this idea that Riddick leaving created a real opportunity to get on the phone with Glenn Schumann and Schumann to get on the phone with Jones. All of a sudden, this is a fun conversation of, wait, you tell me there's a spot? You tell me Riddick doesn't want to be in here? You tell me he doesn't want to be a part of the 2-time national champions? Well, maybe I do. Maybe this is the right spot for me. Maybe for Chris Cole, it's kind of the same thing here, that for some Georgia fans, it's obviously bad news when a player the caliber of Riddick decides to go somewhere else. But for plenty of recruits, you get the impression that it was a very good thing, because the oldest cliche in the book is spots are tight and there's not enough room for all the players who want to come. That has never been more true anywhere than it is for Georgia's 2024 class for right now. And if a spot opens up, much like a reservation at a hard-to-get restaurant, people are diving for it. And Christopher Jones and his counterpart there in the state of Virginia, Chris Cole, may be in kind of the same situation there. So once again, it's another reason to watch Jeff Sintel from last night, who, by the way, also had Dylan Raiola on the show. We'll get to more of that tomorrow. But it sounds like a lot of linebackers, at least a couple of very good ones, see the opportunity now at Georgia as a much better option, given the fact that DeMarcus Riddick has decided he wants to go elsewhere. More on that story as it develops. And for now, that was Run the DawgHouse, presented today by our friends at ServPro. And listen, when it comes to a Georgia recruiting, there's really very little in the way of messes to clean up. Georgia seems to be pretty buttoned up and pretty professional about all of that. Things go smooth sailing just exactly the way you want every single day. Well, guess what? For most of us in our own life, it's not that way. We got messes all the time. Something happens at your home, and sometimes it can be serious, and this is not something to joke about. You have fire damage. You have, major water intrusion. These types of things leave a huge, huge mess to be cleaned up. And let's be frank, I don't have the patience for that. I don't know how to do that. It just seems like a daunting task. I'd have to sell my house if I had something like that, pop up. If not for our friends at ServPro, because the restoration specialists at ServPro, this is what they do on a daily basis. They are almost like magicians when it comes to getting all of your mess cleaned up and putting it all back together like it never happened. That's really what they're all about. When you come back into that, home that you live in, commercial property that your business is run out of, maybe it's a rental property, something like that. When you come back to that property, you're going to see it as it was before the damage ever even occurred, whether it was fire or water or anything else. That's what our friends at ServPro are all about. Each franchise also independently owned and operated there as well. So it's time to get involved and find out what ServPro can do for you. They're restoration specialists if you're in need of that. ServPro.com is the website. It's spelled SERV. ServPro.com for more on that today. So, busy show for us. We'll continue. It's David Greene before we're done. A lot to get into with David. Quarterback situation at Georgia, what to expect from that competition here this summer. David's got some great insight on that. Information on Mike Bobo. All of that is later on. Also, a little concern trolling in the direction of Alabama after they lost an in-state recruiting battle yesterday. We'll do some of that too. That's a fun thing to do. I'll give you a couple of sort of opportunities to make fun of Ohio State coach Ryan Day before we're done on the show today there as well. But for now, on everything involving Georgia football and a guy that our next guest knows very well who had himself a very good week, let's talk all things dogs with the former Georgia wide receiver Terrence Edwards here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether Tharp today.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
A lot to talk to Terrence Edwards about on the program here today. Terrence, I want to begin with this. This is something we've talked about on the show a little bit over the course of the last couple of days. Obviously Georgia was so well represented on the preseason All-SEC team. They had like 16 total players, 11 on the first team. That's a staggering total. I mean, that's beyond the realm of comprehension to have that kind of talent level on one team at one time, if it indeed turns out to kind of be the way it plays out here this season. But in particular, when it comes to some of the pass-catching options, how much did you love seeing Ladd McConkey get a first-team All-SEC nod? Obviously, Brock Bowers and some of that kind of stuff there as well. He's first-team All-SEC too. It finally sort of looks like, Terrence, a lot of these playmakers who did big things for Georgia a year ago, expected to do even bigger things here this year, it sort of seems like they're kind of finally getting the credit they deserve, doesn't it?
Most definitely. I'm very happy for Ladd. I found the picture of Ladd and I when he first started training with me. I just popped up on my memory. I sent it to him. I said, the good old days. So I understand the work he's put in to get to where he's at. And, he's one of those stories that you pull for. Underappreciated, non-existent recruit that people didn't know to first team, all preseason, all SEC. So that's a lot of hard work, sweat, and tears. But for a guy that I really know, I'm very happy for him.
Yeah, and so I had somebody ask me this week about, what is it you see in a guy like that? Because you were very open about him from the very, beginning, and obviously had a relationship with him. But I think the thing that we have learned to see about Ladd is that, given his size and given, characteristics, you may have had, sort of a view of what you thought McConkey could be. At least someone might have had that thought. But the truth is he runs really well. His lateral quickness is maybe his, most elite trait. His ability to kind of go up and high point the football, even as not a super tall guy. He's just more athletic than people would have ever thought he would have been. Like, how much of that did you see from him back when he was training before even getting to Georgia?
The first thing I saw, just the way he caught the football. He had very natural hand and quickness, and those are two things that can make a wide receiver. His quickness and his ability to catch the football, and I saw that very quick. I saw his ability to understand and comprehend and process the information that I was giving him. And he's a former quarterback, so I got a soft spot for those former quarterbacks and receivers.
That's exactly right. And then in the case of Bowers, was also first team on SEC. This is a guy, and my hope for him during the summer is that he would finally kind of be recognized as to me, Terrence, you put him in the same category of Marvin Harrison Jr., you put him in the same category of Caleb Williams, you put him in the category of best players in the country, regardless of position. And I think now that's the way that he's being treated. And I think that it's probably taken a little while to get there because I think people just have a little bit of a different kind of thought about a tight end, but the production speaks for itself here. And kind of post-media days, we're also seeing Bowers, I think, get the right kind of chatter on him too. Now, these players themselves, they don't care about that, and certainly Kirby Smart wants the attention where it's supposed to be on the team and the collective goals they have together. But I just think it's appropriate to appreciate what we're seeing in front of us here, and Bowers being treated as what he is, which is maybe the best player in the entire sport. I'm kind of glad to see that too.
Oh, I think so. I think Brock is the best pound-for-pound football player in the country. I think once it's said and done, Brock, for his abilities, probably be definitely in the top 5 of all UGA all-time players. That's how great I think he is. And, as long as he stays healthy this year, he's going to continue to chase down all my records. So I'm very happy for him. Once we lose him, we do have some guys in the wing.
Yeah.
So Coach Hartley has done a great job of recruiting that position, have a vision for what his tight end should look like, and they should look like Brock Bowers.
I want to talk about a guy for a moment I think you know pretty well. We haven't mentioned this in the show yet this week. We certainly probably should have before now. Before you were at Milton as a coach, you were there at Pace Academy. One of the guys that came through there was Andrew Thomas. I actually talked to a couple of Pace Academy football players yesterday. They were certainly very well aware of this. Andrew Thomas got paid. Massive contract extension for a guy that deserves it as much as anybody ever could. Terrence, how happy are you for the fact that, Andrew Thomas, from the moment most of us ever knew anything about him, was just so businesslike. He stepped on the field as a true freshman as a starter, became one of Georgia's best offensive linemen immediately, made the entire – Georgia's offensive line in 2016 before he got here, if we're going to be completely honest, that was not a great offensive line. It wasn't even a good offensive line if you're just being, blunt level honest here for a moment. In 2017, it changed just like that. Thomas is a huge reason why it did. He handled himself with total class the entire time he was here. He goes to the NFL. Pretty quickly has kind of become one of the most important linemen in that league, getting a gigantic contract extension right here after having been the number 4 overall pick a couple of years ago. Seems like it could not have happened to a better dude. How proud are you for Andrew Thomas and the big payday he got this week?
Very proud, very proud. I was fortunate enough to coach Andrew in high school, so I know Andrew very well. And it couldn't happen to a better person. I sent his offensive line coach at Pace Academy, Kevin Johnson, a congratulations, because he's done a great job with the offensive line at Pace. He is Pace Academy with Jamari and Andrew. Kevin Johnson has done a tremendous job just shaping those young men to be young men, and they're great people. So I'm very happy for him. He's well-deserving. You couldn't ask for a better person to get that type of money because he's going to do right by himself and his family.
Yeah, it's almost like you want to try to figure out some sort of way to bottle that up and sell it, right? And, listen, I'm sure when it comes to, developing as a player, you have, I'm sure, some ups and downs and some rocky roads at times when a guy's super young. But as I said before, by the time, we knew who Thomas was, it's been kind of all, straight ahead, pointing towards the top, which is obviously where he is right now. And the approach that he's taken to that, I just think is so commendable. If you could bottle that up, if you could sell it, if you could replicate that with everybody on your roster, whether it's high school or college or whatever else, that's exactly what you'd want to do. He has just seemingly taken the right approach to his career every step of the way.
Yes, and if I could quote his offensive line coach at Pace, who actually taught me how to coach high school football, Kevin Johnson, he called it the blueprint. He's been following the blueprint of Kevin Johnson since he was in middle school, him and Jamari and many others. And this is the blueprint that he laid out for Jamari as a ninth grader, and the blueprint is still in effect, and it's shaping up. I think Jamari will be the next one in the next couple of years to receive a payday. So give all the credit to Kevin Johnson and Andrew Thomas' family.
Yeah, I saw where Jamari was obviously on social media super happy for Andrew Thomas. And you're right, for Coach Johnson there, Jamari hadn't gotten the big payday yet because he kind of got screwed by the NFL draft unfairly, I believe. But if he continues to perform like he did as a rookie, then you're talking about a big-time second-year deal for him too. When you start thinking about some of these high school coaches in Georgia who've kind of gotten their future, NFL stars paid, the former offensive line coach at Pace Academy there, he's going to have bragging rights over just about anybody at that point in time.
Oh, most definitely. I mean, he got two guys that started at left tackle. I mean, you just think about what everyone thought of Jamari. No one really thought he could play left tackle in the NFL, and he's done it, and done it at a high level. Yes, we all thought he would be a first or second rounder, but it is what it is. He's there now. He started. He showed people that he could play, and that's the blueprint that Kevin Johnson laid out for them. And when you have players stick to the game plan, this what happens. I
want to finish with this topic, and I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on this necessarily, but I am kind of curious of your thoughts because you know this state really well. Yesterday we saw Dylan Raiola, the brand new Buford quarterback, the 5-star Georgia commit, of course, at the first ever Georgia High School Football Media Day. I was lucky to be a part of that. I didn't get to be there when Dylan was there, but I was there a little bit later on after my show was done. And I think for those of us who follow Georgia high school football, Raiola at Buford's going to be really interesting. Buford's obviously one of the best programs in the country. This is also, Terrence, a program that's been a little bit run first in the past. They had Justice Haynes a year ago. You would certainly want to be if you have a guy like that, but that's kind of been their overall, approach in most years. What kind of outlook, what kind of expectation do you have for Raiola here this year? I mean, obviously going to be playing against great competition. I think it's a great measuring stick for him, and maybe a proving, or not proving's the wrong word because he's proven himself as a prospect, but maybe a preparation ground for him as he gets ready to go on to Georgia. And yet, just given the way in which Buford plays, it may not be just the biggest stat lines in the world. What's your overall expectation for what we're going to see Dylan playing in our state here prior to going to Georgia once the season's done?
If I had to predict some stats, I would think he'll throw for about 2,200 yards, about 25 touchdowns. Because Buford's going to be Buford. Buford's going to run the football, and I don't think they're going to change their identity just for Dylan Raiola. They've been very successful doing it the Buford way, but I think they'll throw it a little bit more, but they're going to do what Buford do, and that's running power football downhill.
And, obviously, you've got your own things to worry about there with the Milton program, but I'm guessing you're probably like me on this a little bit, which is I'm just kind of glad to have him here. A, it's entertaining, anytime you have, better players in our state. And this year, gosh, we got such a, high level of talent in the state. It's going to be so much fun to watch these games over the course of the next few weeks. But also for Georgia fans who want to feel like they know more about Dylan before he gets here. Playing against these 7A Georgia defenses and what he'll be seeing throughout the regular season and the postseason we expect there too, it's just an interesting data point seeing Dylan against this better competition, which Georgia undoubtedly is. So I think it's kind of good all the way around. Now, I guess if you're, a fan of a different program or involved with a different program, it's one more thing to kind of think about in terms of, your competition level. But in terms of evaluating Dylan, boy, I think it's really fun here over the course of the next few weeks.
Yes, I think so. I think, for the Georgia fans, it's going to be exciting to be able to just go to a Buford game to see your future quarterback of the Georgia Bulldogs right down the street from you. So it's going to be exciting. I'm here in 7A, and if God willing, hope we get an opportunity to play him just to, see him up close. So it's going to be a great year in 7A football.
It really is. And a Milton-Buford matchup sometime in the future, I think a lot of fans would be very, very interested in that there as well. Terrence, good stuff. I know you're working with those middle school guys right now, and obviously all kinds of things throughout the year going on with the Terrence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy. So remind folks how they can connect with you online if that's something they'd like to do.
Yes, you can reach me on all social media platforms at Terrence Edwards Wide Receiver Academy.
Terrence, thanks for your time. We'll look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, so we'll play some of what Dylan had to say on tomorrow's show. Once again, you can see that with Jeff Santel last night before the Hedges presented by Kroger. Good stuff from Dylan Raiola. It's, I'm sure, kind of an eye-opening experience. You sort of walk in for the very first time on a media day like that. A lot of TV cameras, a lot of reporters. High school football is just different in a state like this. College football there is as well. And obviously we're proud of the way we do it around here, and we're happy to have Dylan in our state and a part of what's going to make this season so much fun. You think about the quarterbacks alone, between the video online on the DeMarcus Riddick to the stadium in his car, like his Mercedes or whatever it is that he has. He's got the Mercedes dealership. In Saban's car, Saban and Riddick are riding along together to the stadium for that spring game. So it's pretty obvious that Alabama put a big full-court press on DeMarcus Riddick, and they didn't get him. Auburn did. Now, the rumors out there that Auburn has access to a big NIL fund right now. They were kind of holding that money because they didn't want Brian Harsin to waste it. And so now that Hugh Freeze is the coach there, they're kind of unlocking some potential in that program that Harsin was just never going to have, the opportunity to take advantage of. So maybe that's part of the story here. But you better believe Alabama fans are noticing this right now. Head-to-head loss against Auburn for a player the caliber of Riddick they've clearly gone after. Just worth filing away. Do I still expect Alabama to have an elite recruiting class before this cycle is done? I do. I think it'll be something close within the standard deviation or so of what Alabama typically has been. But losses like this will certainly get your attention, and certainly a lot of Auburn fans kind of waving the flag today against their in-state rivals because they feel like they got over on the Crimson Tide, and we want to make sure you were aware of that. Something else you may also be aware of. Yesterday we found out a rumor that had been out there and kind of sort of dismissed, I guess, a little bit, finally came true, which is that Colorado is leaving the Pac-12 for the Big 12. Now, let me give you the interesting backstory here on this for a moment. So here's the landscape of the Power 5 conferences. You know that the SEC and the Big Ten both recently signed very large and lucrative media rights deals. In the future, those two leagues are sort of thought to be the Big 2 conferences, well out in front of anything else as a part of the college sports landscape. Then underneath that, you've got the ACC, which is a league that a lot of members would seemingly like to get out of. It's a pretty open secret that if certain members could leave the league, if they feel like they have a place they could go to, they would want to leave. But they can't right now because the ACC has a very long-range media rights deal in place, and it's kind of a paltry sum of money compared to what the Big Ten and the SEC have, but it's also legally binding, kind of holding that league together. There's also a handful of ACC teams that wouldn't have anywhere to go if the ACC disbanded, so they certainly aren't going to vote to break up the league because it's their ticket to remain a part of the major college sports landscape. So you've got the ACC intact, but the members in the league are not happy, but they're also not going anywhere because of the nature of that contract. Then you've got the other two Power 5 leagues, the Big 12 and the Pac-12, who've been kind of battling because they've both been in the process of renegotiating media rights deals, the funds that kind of fuel the leagues here. And we don't talk a lot about this kind of stuff because most of this takes place a good long ways from here, and a lot of this sort of takes place below the standard of the typical teams we would talk about on a show like this. But there's been a real battle between, I would say, Big 12 fans and sort of national media types. And it's amazing. The same national reporters that get everything wrong, and there are literally a handful of, high Twitter follower, what you sort of think of as blue checks, although now they make a big show about not having a blue check. It's kind of funny. But high Twitter count follower, national media types, they are wrong about literally everything. I mean, if you think about it, it's just as hard to get everything wrong as it is to get everything right. But there are certain handful of sort of national media types who are literally forever on getting anything right. And the latest example of that is there's been a lot of high-minded, ivory tower talk among some national media types that the Big 12 is essentially doomed to disband because it has no value whatsoever. And a lot of Big 12 fans have been sort of saying, well, how come our league is worse off than the Pac-12 is? How come our league couldn't poach from the Pac-12 and, kind of build a league that can have some staying power? What does the Pac-12 have going for it in kind of a post-USC, UCLA world? And a lot of national media types have been left to say, oh, you just don't understand the nature of all this and blah, 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 blah. Well, come to find out, fans were right again, and it seems like some of the media types were wrong again, because Colorado has been now poached from the Pac-12 to the Big 12. Now, some of the folks far out west are going to say, well, it doesn't matter. Colorado's not very good. It's probably the worst program in the Pac-12. But it's also the first of what could be more dominoes to fall there as well, because we've now heard from some of the key leadership around the University of Arizona. They're certainly getting a little nervous here, it would seem, with the idea that Colorado's leaving. They put out a statement yesterday saying they're watching for that Pac-12 media rights deal to come out. The Pac-12 has promised this TV deal to come out over and over and over again. It never has. And there's a very good chance that a lot of this is going to be available on streaming only, and it's going to be a very small contract overall, kind of based on what maybe previous media rights deals would have been for major Power 5 college conferences. And the sense that I get is that Colorado might not end up being the last team to leave from the Pac-12. And the Big 12, in this sort of battle to see which of these leagues can truly have some staying power and survive, I mean, the best that I can tell, the Big 12's made pretty shrewd moves since losing Texas, losing Oklahoma, and they have ensured their survival, it would seem. And some of the, sort of ivory tower folks who think the Pac-12 is destined to always have a spot at the table because they have a lot of fancy pants academic, institutions. Sort of seems like those folks that thought that may have been wrong again. Now, one more story to get to here before we kind of hear from David Greene, the former Georgia quarterback. Ryan Day, the Ohio State coach. I'll just be very candid about this just for a quick moment. We're also going to make fun of Ryan Day in a moment for our golden shoe to kind of close out the program today. Day is not a coach that I respect. And when it comes to like the overall battle between fan bases and rival fan bases and programs, and like there is something in the nature of, hey, sometimes you respect the guy across from you as a worthy adversary. Obviously, we like making fun of Alabama, Nick Saban, and we like, kind of anytime we can sort of poke fun or point up, some sort of negative, of course, we're going to probably take the bait to do that. But I've never met a Georgia fan that didn't respect Nick Saban. That is clearly a worthy adversary. On the day that Nick Saban does retire, maybe sooner than some Alabama fans want it to be, but on the day in which Nick Saban does retire, Georgia fans will look at him and say, you know what? That was a guy who made our life really, really tough for a very long time. You can't really coach college football over the course of a long period of time better than Nick Saban coached it. Respect will be given. The proverbial, kind of figurative handshake will certainly be given. Take your hat off, whatever you want to describe that. That's the way that Georgia fans will feel about Nick Saban when he retires, possibly as soon as the end of the season, when that finally goes down. But that same level of respect is not extended to every Georgia adversary, and I would say that Ryan Day is certainly an example of the latter on that. This is a guy who has whined incessantly about the Peach Bowl, still complaining about the officiating there, and basically complaining that Georgia played too rough in that game because of the Javon Bullard hit against Marvin Harrison Jr., which unfortunately resulted in a Harrison injury, but from a Georgia standpoint prevented a touchdown, which clearly you're trying to do if you want to win the game. Well, the Day whining actually extends beyond just the Peach Bowl and what happened between Harrison and Bullard. He was at Big Ten Media Days this week talking about the fact that he wants to move the Ohio State-Michigan game off of the last week of the regular season because in the future, the Big Ten's not going to have division format. No league's going to in the future. And he's concerned about the fact that you may see Ohio State and Michigan now play in back-to-back weeks in future years, playing at the end of the regular season and in the Big Ten championship game there as well. And I'm sorry, like the idea that you want like a century's worth of history? I mean, like, other than the pandemic year of 2020 in which the Big Ten embarrassed itself and Michigan Ohio State did not play that year. Don't you have about a century's worth of history of Michigan Ohio State playing to conclude the regular season? And now Ryan Day wants to do away with all of that. You can read the story at ESPN.com. Wants to do away with all of that because it's too hard for him to consider playing Michigan in back-to-back weeks. Day, if he had the capacity for shame, ought to be embarrassed. The idea that you want to kind of twist this history, do away with that heritage because it makes your job just a little bit easier. How about you just beat Michigan, period, before you worry about having to play them in back-to-back weeks? That might be step one on all of this. And, the old jab, I guess, that Jim Harbaugh kind of threw in his direction of the guy who was born on third base and thinks that he hit a triple. I don't know that there's ever been a more apt description given ever at any point other than that. This is a guy who seemingly his entire coaching career has been handed to him, and all he does publicly is ask for more things to be handed to him there as well. That is not a good look. And we'll make that cruising around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And we'll turn our attention back to the Georgia Bulldogs here, more on what expects to be a very intense quarterback competition, a brand new level of insight into the new Georgia offensive coordinator, his second tour of duty here with Mike Bobo, and a fun event coming up on Saturday there as well. A lot of ground to cover with the former Georgia quarterback David Greene here right now. And here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether Tharp, happy to have the former Georgia quarterback David Greene here on the program today. David's a guy that we've been big fans of for a long time, and it's great to have him back on the show. David, welcome back, and we hope you're doing well.
Yeah, Brandon, good to be on, buddy. You having a good summer so far?
Yeah, so far so good. Certainly looking ahead to the upcoming season. And obviously, David, when we look back on your career, one of the things that we remember you for is really being one of the most prolific winners in the history of college football. That was kind of the hallmark. Your record in terms of how many wins you're able to lead Georgia to as the starting quarterback. So certainly you understand what this Georgia team has been able to do over the course of the last couple of years, and frankly how hard all of that is. You also have been, I think, cheering as loudly for this as anybody has because of how proud you are of your alma mater. What has it been like to kind of watch Georgia win these last 2 national championships and now have a chance to come back and, as we say around here, go for 3-23, win another one again? It is really an amazing time to be a Dog fan, isn't it?
It's incredible. I was thinking about the other day, my third child is a 6-year-old boy, and he loves going on and watching like the YouTube videos of the Georgia games and that kind of deal. And I was telling my wife the other day, I'm like, he's got no sense of reality because Georgia hasn't really even lost a football game since he was 3 or 4 years old. So he just thinks every time we come up to a football game, it always ends up on the good side of things. So we're certainly enjoying this run while we have it. And I think, Kirby said it perfect at the end of last year championship game. He's like, look, we can't take this for granted. It's to win a national championship, you got to have some luck. You've got to, so things have to go your way, and you have to obviously have a great team and work extremely hard. But the fact that we're even talking about a three-peat is incredible because even winning one of them every now and then is pretty impressive. And I think last year, when they just showed that Georgia-Ohio State game, replay not long ago, and I think any Georgia fan, when we go back and watch that one, you're going, man, how did we pull that one out?
Sure.
But I tell people, I don't apologize for that because we've been in that. We've been in Ohio State situation when we played Alabama a few times as well. So it was good to be on the good side of that one.
So you mentioned your kids going back and watching the old films. What do they think when they see on YouTube? They see Dad back there doing it, whether it be Tennessee in 2001 or Alabama in 2002 or some of the great wins that you got as a Georgia quarterback. What do your kids think about going back and watching you in some of those older games?
First thing they'd mention is, Dad, the film's kind of blurry. They just don't think it's that cool anymore. They've seen the plays a few times, but they love watching the current stuff. I mean, I think maybe it's just because they're so used to seeing the kids' names, and I think it's still trying to hard, especially for the younger ones, to kind of piece together. Yeah, Dad, you played? Trying to put it all together, but. With all the excitement right now, with the Georgia football program, the success they've had, it's actually been a lot of fun as a family because we've got to do so many fun things in the fall and have so much enjoyment just geared around watching the Dogs play.
That's great.
It's been awesome.
Well, speaking of the current team and what's going on, obviously Georgia's about to wage a pretty serious quarterback competition here. It's been ongoing, obviously, throughout the year, but now it's about to get really serious with the start of fall camp next week. You've got Carson Beck, who seemed to, in the spring, kind of ahead there, and yet, Kirby Smart has made it very clear that, hey, this is wide open, and a guy like Brock Vandagriff has his chance to emerge here, and Gunnar Stockton's going to be heard from there as well. Obviously, Stockton thought to have a very bright future in this program. You know what it's like, David, to win a quarterback competition in Georgia and then kind of hold on to that job as well. So you've got some experience to kind of think about how these players are going to handle all of this. I guess what, are you kind of looking for from that position from Georgia here over the course of the next couple of weeks?
Well, first of all, it's going to be tough to step in Bennett's shoes, what he was able to do. I mean, he was remarkable, and really when we needed Stetson to play his best ball, he did. I mean, you look at those playoff games, the kind of success he had was incredible. All the reports you hear from Carson Beck is he's done a phenomenal job of stepping in, commanding the offense. I think a lot of people can see and kind of get a feel for how athletic, Brock Vandagriff is. I mean, he's got a huge arm. I remember watching him play a number of times in high school as well. The one thing that may possibly give him an edge at times as well is I heard an interview at one point. They asked Kirby, do you evaluate the quarterback position any differently now since Stetson has been here? And he said, no, not really. But he did say, I do put more stock in mobile quarterbacks. And so I think that would be something just naturally. Vandagriff's probably a little more athletic and run the football a little bit better. And so I think that's something that could maybe give him an edge a little bit. And then when you look at Gunner, I think Gunner to me is just one of those guys that he just kind of has an it factor a little bit. Like you can't really always put your finger on what makes him unique, but he's kind of one of those guys that when the ball is in his hand, you kind of think that you're going to go down and score. And you know what I mean? You can't necessarily put your finger on why, but he just kind of puts that, he has kind of that aura, which is great. So, Georgia's in a great position with the level of talent we have there. And I can imagine Kirby's in a pretty tough position here because it's different than when I played. I mean, you got to constantly recruit your own kids every year as well.
That's right.
So I know there's certainly no incentive to make an announcement early on, even if he's leaning one way or the other, just because he wants to hang on to as many good quarterbacks as he can.
I want to close here in a moment because you and I are going to be a part of a really fun event on Saturday. I want to make sure people are aware of that, their chance to meet your former coach, Mark Richt, which we had Coach Richt on the show a couple of weeks ago. So I'll tell folks about that here in a moment. Let me squeeze in one more question before we get there, though. Another thing that you have some insight on that I think a lot of Georgia fans are very curious here this year is the return of Mike Bobo as offensive coordinator. Now, Bobo wasn't your offensive coordinator. I guess that would have still been Coach Richt, but he was your quarterback's coach. And at the time, he was only a couple of years older than you were. So I guess that was a little bit of a, probably a different kind of deal there than most coaches you may have dealt with during your career. But, as someone who has kind of been, interacting with Coach Bobo on kind of a coach-player relationship, what kind of personality did you see from him kind of behind closed doors there? And what do you think Georgia fans are going to get from Coach Bobo as he kind of returns to that offensive coordinator role here back at UGA again?
Yeah, I would say Coach Bobo, his personality, demeanor is a lot closer to Kirby. I mean, he is a fiery, competitive guy. I mean, I can only imagine, Kirby and Bobo together. I mean, they're extremely competitive. They want to win. He's proven time and time again he can really he can score a lot of points. There's no question with that. And I love the fact, I think Brandon more than anything, that he's had a year under his belt already. So he already understands, the terminology they were using from last year. He understands the personality, the personnel of the team. And he understands probably the way what Kirby's looking for. And so I think it's great. I think it's a lot harder sometimes when you're just coming in for the first year and trying to get used to, being around the team and the personnel and how Kirby's doing. But he's already been there for a year. He's got a good feel of what kind of players he's got around him, because that's key for an offensive coordinator, right? You're trying to figure out, how do I maximize, my team's skill set. And he had a head start because he was already evaluating and drawing up plays last year for the team.
So it's this Saturday, starting at 3 p.m. there at the D1 training facility in Athens. Former Georgia coach Mark Richt, a great collection of former Georgia players. David Greene, our buddy John Stinchcomb going to be there as well. Bakari Rambo, Tim Worley, former Georgia running back. The best way to kind of get more information about this, because you do have to have tickets in advance to be a part of this. If you go to eventbrite.com, that's B-R-I-T-E, eventbrite.com, CA Autographs is who's putting this on. So you can get your autograph ticket there for Coach Richt. Great collection of former Georgia players, including our good friend David Greene, who's going to be obviously there as well. So terrific event going down this Saturday. I'm going to be there too from 3 to 5 p.m. there at the D1 training facility in Athens. An unbelievable day of former Georgia players, many of whom played for Mark Richt there, and Coach Richt himself there signing autographs too. So going to be a great event. Go to eventbrite.com and then CA Autographs for the Mark Richt autograph signing once you get in there to Eventbrite. What a great day. You do have to have tickets in advance on this, so make sure you check that out online at eventbrite.com for a lot more on that. David, I know you love the chance to interact with Georgia fans, kind of tell old stories and remember great moments, and obviously a chance to spend time with Coach Richt. I know none of us are going to turn that opportunity down.
Now excited. I mean, it's anytime you get a chance to see Coach Richt, it's former players, it's great. And just with the excitement of, Georgia football coming back, just really exciting. They've done a fantastic job with that D1 facility. Coach's son, John Richt, has done just an amazing job. He's offensive coordinator over at Prince Avenue. And watching those guys light up the scoreboard last year, he's done a really, really good job. And he's great at developing kids. So, I mean, if you're around the area, I would definitely suggest coming, because they definitely know how to develop some talent.
David, thank you so much for your time here today. Love your insight on these dogs. Obviously, we've got great memories of your career, and we have a good time talking about that too. But I know it's a fun time to be a UGA fan, and great perspective from you on all that. I'll see you on Saturday there at D1 with Coach Richt and a great collection of former Georgia players, and hopefully back here again on DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether Tharp again very soon as well.
Thank you, buddy. Appreciate it, Brandon.
How much do you love having David Greene here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether Tharp today? David's a guy that's been guest of ours many times over the years. Had not had him on in a little while, though, so it was fun to get him back on there, and looking forward to seeing a lot of you on Saturday. Once again, it's Eventbrite.com, CA Autographs. That's who's hosting the autograph event. You do have to have your ticket in advance. Be there at the D1 training facility 3 to 5 p.m. on Saturday for that. Coach Rick, great collection of former Georgia players, including David, John Stinchcomb, Tim Worley, Bakari Rambo, a lot of former Dogs in the building on Saturday, and really excited about all of that. All right, also want to be excited about this there as well. We kind of had our, I guess, little jab at Ryan Day a little earlier. How about a golden shoe to make fun of the guy we're not calling Blackbeard because of the unnaturally dark color of his beard? Archduke Wave Runner sent this to me. He said, I forgot I made this a while back. We were talking about the chemically enhanced beard the other day, and so he decided to send this to us. It's the easy color hair and beard, no stains on the skin. Yeah, listen, I'm just telling you, I don't know that anyone's beard, especially most guys, the beard comes in a little bit grayer than the hair does anyway. The idea that Ryan Day's beard is that dark colored, we sort of think there may be a little bit of a chemical enhancement. He may be like the baseball of the 1990s when it comes to chemical enhancements of what we're kind of seeing there on our screen. So very funny stuff by Archduke Wave Runner. We will give him a golden shoe there for that. We'll also remind you our Gator Hater countdown. Lousy, stinking Gators. 93 days from now, Georgia in Jacksonville, beating up on them again. We love the cocktail party. We love the fun. And there is nothing more fun than dragging around the Gators. We will look forward to doing that to those lousy, stinking Gators 93 days from now. That is our Gator Hater countdown. We'll see all of you back here tomorrow for DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether and Tharp. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews, the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. You can trust R.S. Andrews on all of that today. I think we promised you a busy show. I feel like we made good on that promise. And now we'll get to your comments. We did not go long yesterday because I had to go to the Media Days event. We will go a little longer today. Probably not obnoxious, but, normal. So we'll do all of that. Antoine Sampson says that Mike Bobo and Hines Ward were his two first Georgia quarterbacks. That's a good time. I mean, listen, the teams themselves weren't always great, but they were fun to watch, though, weren't they? I mean, it's like 90s were kind of my formative years, too, in many ways. And, not always great teams, but like Hines is a quarterback, courageous win against Tech in 95. He's pretty banged up and injured. That was fun. Mike Bobo was a very good player. Bobo is one of those guys that probably does not get enough credit for how good of a quarterback he actually was. He was the quarterback after Eric Zier, so he probably played in Zier's shadow just a bit. But the numbers that Bobo put up as a quarterback for Georgia in, say, 97, they were really spectacular. Had the bowl record, of course, for completions for a long time. But his overall numbers were really good. And to me, one of the great what-if scenarios in Georgia football history is that what if you didn't have so many injuries on that 95 team, which turned out to be, Ray Goff's last year, Georgia. Bad injury to Bobo, tough injury to Robert Edwards. A lot of those guys who became really important players for Georgia on a 1997 team in which, Jim Donnan, after a year on the job, had kind of gotten settled in there, and they went 9-2 in the regular season. A lot of those guys that were kind of a catalyst for that were injured for Goff in 95. And, listen, that's a long time ago now, and I'm sure we have a whole portion of our audience that says, I don't spend any time thinking about what might have been in 1995. But for me, part of me does kind of wonder if that last year for Goff could have gone differently. DMar42 says Hines Ward's the coach for the San Antonio team. Is that XFL or USFL? Which league? I know he is coaching there, and I know that that's something that Hines Ward's very serious about. For a long time, Ward made no bones about the fact that he wanted to coach. And that was one of those things that, some of those, media types that I kind of joked about before were also kind of poo-pooing as an idea. But, Hines has been pretty serious since then about putting in the work to be a coach in some form or fashion. He worked with the Jets, was supposed to work at FAU, kind of moved on to one of those spring leagues. Admittedly, I don't remember if it's the USFL or the XFL, but it's one of those leagues. And so I don't really know where it goes next for Hines Ward. But for a guy who's made a bunch of money and really probably had every right not to coach, has seemingly kind of convinced, committed himself to that. Randy Payne checking in. You love to see that. He says go for 3 in 23. Randy, appreciate that for sure. Let's see what else. Paul Moon says his first Georgia running back was Musa Smith. So I had a chance back during the spring. I did a really nice thing with John Stinchcomb. John was kind of spearheading one of those. Are you familiar with Night to Shine? It's a prom event that Tim Tebow started. One of the, it's like I don't like, giving a lousy stinking Gator credit for anything, but this is kind of a nice thing that Tebow has done. It's a very nice thing that he's done. It's kind of a prom for special needs folks. And there was an event not too far down the road from where our studio is, and John was kind of doing that. And John had a whole bunch of former Georgia players on hand there for that. I was a part of that there too. Musa Smith was one of the guys who was there. And man, Musa was just really, really great to see and doing a great job. And that was really fun, really fun. So I got a chance to hang out with him a little bit at that the other day. Also, the leading rusher on that 2002 Georgia team there as well, an SEC champion. William Adams says that Ward's in the XFL. Admittedly, I don't really keep up very well with the XFL and the USFL, the two spring leagues in place right now, but Ward is in the XFL. Charles Ross says, how are the Tennessee fans able to take the goalpost out of the stadium? So you do have those, gates down at the bottom, right, where near where the locker rooms are, the buses have to drive into the stadiums. They're the big gates that open up, so that they were able to kind of walk their way through the tunnel, then through the gate, and kind of get out that way. That is kind of how you'd be able to do that. Taylor Russell says back then you had the Musa Smith chant turn into the Greg Blue chant. And there were a lot of those. My first iteration of that was back when Bruce Benedict was the Braves catcher before he became a very bad SEC basketball official. He was a Braves catcher, and all the Braves fans do the Bruce thing. So that was my first kind of version of that. And then we had a lot of that around Georgia football between Musa Smith and Greg Blue. A lot of that ooh stuff. There was a lot of that for sure. Paul Moon also mentioning Fred Gibson, Reggie Brown as really fun wide receivers. Yeah, one of the forgotten Georgia games that was so much fun is the 2004 Georgia LSU game. I don't know if that lives on YouTube. I'm assuming it must. I don't know when the last time I saw that on, say, the SEC Network or ESPN Classic or something like that. But this is Nick Saban coaching LSU, defending national champions, coming to Athens after Georgia had lost the heartbreaker in Baton Rouge the year before. And Georgia absolutely demolished them. That's a huge win. Great crowd. It's probably at that time is the best crowd I'd ever heard in Sanford Stadium. We've had, obviously, many big games since then. This is a long time ago now, almost 20 years. But that's a great Georgia game. And Brown and Gibson both had monstrous days that day. David Greene did too, who we just talked to. Monstrous games that day. And really, if you're making a list of the really fun, memorable Georgia games, Georgia LSU in 2004, if you're old enough to have experienced it, it ought to be on your list. I don't think that game gets brought up nearly as much as it should. DMar42 says Reggie Brown had a nice career with the Eagles. Not sure what happened to Gibson. Yeah, Gibson was with the Steelers for a little while. Is that right? And I don't know where Fred Gibson is now. Reggie Brown, I believe, is going to our Georgia High School Football Hall of Fame this year. But I'm not sure where Gibson is. BA's Ty Stone Cold Style says, is it the heat, 112 degrees causing the YouTube or internet lag? Are y'all having that again today? Is that, please tell me yes or no. Is that been an issue again today? Court Michelle asking about Rodrigo Blankenship. Yeah, Blankenship was trying out as a free agent, had lost his job there in Indianapolis. And DMar42 says he's with the Tampa Bay Bucks now. Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Alex Davis says, I played safety and I switched my number to number 10 because of Thomas Davis. Yeah, Davis, one of the all-timers at Georgia. All-timers. Croaking 123 laughing at Ryan Day. Yeah, the crying from him, from Crying Day, which some of y'all have called him before, does kind of remind you of Auburn whining about having to play both Georgia and Alabama during November. Very similar. That is true. DMart42 says it did freeze for a couple of minutes today. Well, that is really disappointing news. That is really disappointing news. I'm trusting that we're hard at work to get that fixed, but that is really disappointing news. DT also on the DawgNation homepage letting us know that there as well. So very, very disappointing news. Let me go over to Facebook here for a moment and see what folks are saying over there. On Facebook, we'll get a few comments over here. Yeah, it sounds like the Facebook folks kind of having the same issue. Boy, Celicia Gagnon also kind of pointing out that the Bucks got Rodrigo Blankenship, so we wish him well there on that. Joseph Kennedy says, where is Jamie Newman? Yeah, that's one of those, I don't know if we'll ever get the full story in the Newman thing or not. I'm not quite so sure. Barry Watkins asking about the KJ Bolden stuff. Yeah, a lot of folks kind of talking about, what almost seemed like a little bit of a subliminal message by Bolden there on that. So we'll see. Rhodey Williams says YouTube is the closest thing we'll ever have to a time machine. And I do like the fact that you can find so much of that stuff. If you want to go down a Georgia football rabbit hole and find a bunch of stuff, you can certainly do that. A lot of fun stuff to go back and sort of experience there on that. Wayne Kirkland kind of pointing out his belief that the quarterback battle is wide open, that Kirby and Bobo are going to lean towards the more mobile quarterback. That's obviously something that David Greene talked about a little bit today there too. So we'll see what opportunity that gives, to a guy like Brock Vandagriff, who my understanding is had a very good summer. I mean, my understanding is that Vandagriff has had himself a good summer and put himself in a position to compete here. So we'll see. And obviously, I've always been very high on Gunnar Stockton, so it should be a lot of fun. William Camacho says he doesn't really do XFL or the USFL, but he is happy that Hines is coaching, and I would say I probably agree with that too. Dwayne Hodges says Georgia's on a higher level of playing than any other team in college football, period. Yeah, recruiting, on the field, everything else there as well. Doesn't get any better than that. Randy Hall says it's been said that Jiffy Lube's going to do an NIL deal with Ryan Day for his hair coloring, which is very funny. Matt Rukavina says that probably will not see Alabama in the SEC championship game. Yeah, it's certainly my pick to see LSU. The Bama over under about 10.5. My understanding is there's been a pretty good bit of action on the under there on that. So, the idea for a team that lost a couple of regular season games a year ago, the thought is they may be in a position to do that again here this year too. Alan Bryan looking forward to cooler weather and Georgia football. Yeah. Probably have to wait a long time for that cooler weather, but luckily won't have to wait nearly as long for that Georgia football. Yeah, PDT reminds us of this. That this came up during the offseason. The idea that Baker Mayfield's talking about he still doesn't like Hot Rod Rodrigo Blankenship going back to the Rose Bowl. That's right. That was a very funny part of the earlier portion of the offseason. That's right. Thomas Tyson says that he thinks that Bama beats LSU, but LSU still goes to Atlanta. I mean, it certainly could happen. I mean, for all the talk we have here about, Alabama, is they are still expected to be a point spread favorite against LSU. And they're favored against LSU. They're going to probably be a favorite against everyone they play. So, on a game-to-game basis, Alabama is still going to be a point spread favorite against everybody, including LSU. I think it's the Alabama-Texas game that's so interesting, though, because, I mean, to me, if you see Alabama handle business against Texas, then I would say that you have to kind of recalibrate here and at least consider the possibility that they are set up to go on a run, over the course of the season where, maybe they do start winning games somewhat more convincingly than they have in the past. Because like the other thing is, not only has Alabama lost a little bit more frequently than we are used to seeing them, but you want to go back and look at last year, 2021, in some respects, they've also been playing some games a little closer than we're used to seeing them play. You know, Alabama used to be a fairly, I don't want to say nothing's a guarantee, but Alabama in kind of a 2 or 3 touchdown type range, they were very good at covering the spread in those kinds of situations, and they have not done that the last couple of years. Certainly not last year, and in some respects in 2021 either, have not covered the spread at the same clip in which they once did. So what I was kind of thinking is if you want to have like a gambling strategy out there for Alabama this year, you know, I think that if you think under on Alabama, then as opposed to like having your money tied up all season long, because that's the problem with what you call like a futures bet, where you bet on a odds to win a championship or a season win total, you are tying your money up for the entirety of the season. You don't get to cash until the end of the year. So if you really think Alabama under, you know, you might be better off on the short term, you know, single game bet on Texas going into Tuscaloosa. You'll get some points. You'll have that on your side. If you believe Alabama's an under team, then that probably shows up in some form or fashion against Texas there week 2. And if you end up getting that wrong, well, maybe you then flip-flop, you reverse course, and you start believing Alabama's the kind of team that can take care of business moving forward. And maybe you get back on that Texas loss by being on Alabama moving forward. Now, there's also a chance you lose all those bets because that can't happen. But I was sort of thinking about that as an overall betting strategy for Alabama. If you believe the under on 10.5 is good, then you might be better off just betting Texas week 2. And if you get that wrong, then maybe you kind of recalibrate Alabama and you kind of ride them a little bit after that. It's a thought anyway. Taylor Russell says he's officially rooting against Florida State because of KJ Bolden. That's certainly a reasonable theory. Charles Ross says, does Carrollton play Buford this year? Not until the postseason would they be expected to play. And I don't know the bracket. The bracket in Georgia high school football, you're not seeded all the way through. You are, that they match regions up together. So I don't know where Carrollton and Buford would potentially meet. Would it be a state championship or would they meet prior to that? Now, they're two of the better teams in 7A. Carrollton played for the championship a year ago. I don't know, based on the bracket setup, where Carrollton and Buford would play. Someone probably does, but I don't know how those regions match up right now. Frederick Meredith says Carrollton and Buford would be a spectacle indeed. Yeah, it'd be as big a battle in the playoffs involving Georgia quarterbacks as I think we've probably ever seen. I'm thinking. Foster Moss, Corky Kell has not happened yet. The Corky Kell Dave Hunter Classic happens like the week of the 16th, a couple of weeks into August. We kind of get there for that. So we're going to have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I've got the games on Wednesday, Friday, and 2 of the games on Saturday. Saturday, of course, in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. We're going to do instant replay for those. So I'm excited about that. Let's see what else. All right, a couple more comments. We're going to get ready to get out of here today. All right, Paul Moon on the subject of Rashad Jones. Yeah, the scoop and score in the 2003 game, that's a really fun memory. Really fun memory. Actually, that's Sean Jones. That's Sean Jones that did that. Sean Jones in 2003. That was a fun one. All right, final comments we're going to roll for today. Joseph Kennedy says Dogs are the best team in the land. You better believe that. Kaylee says they have not released the brackets yet for the playoffs. We don't know which regions are matched up there in that spot. Although Doug Rayburn said he thought it was going to be the third round. So there is certainly a possibility it could happen prior to the state championship. The point here is it could happen prior to the state championship, that it's not like it would be in, like, say, the NCAA basketball tournament where you're seeding everybody 1 through 16. You do seed within the regions, but the brackets are sort of made up region versus region and not based on seeding across the state. David Gross says Ryan Day wants all the coaches to participate in No Shave November, which is very funny. All right, Go back to DawgNation.com. Final comments over there. Randy Hall says, "Them Dogs" on the SEC network right now. Very good documentary. I thought it was very well done. Very well done indeed. AJ Ferraro says those Buford games are going to be sold out every week. Good luck finding tickets. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. We've also got really good matchup coming up on Peachtree TV this year. We're going to see Buford-Marietta relatively early in the season. I'm excited about that. Marietta always a really good team, and Buford's going to be a great, great product this year. So I'm excited about the fact we're going to have Buford-Marietta on TV pretty early on in the season. So that's going to be a blast. Cannot wait for that. For now, though, we're going to get ready to wrap things up here today. Appreciate you being a part of our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Y'all find R.S. Andrews online, rsandrews.com, for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. You can trust R.S. Andrews on all of that today, including, as somebody said, very hot right now, getting that AC cool down for you. R.S. Andrews is a big part of being able to do that. So find them online at rsandrews.com. Have a great day. Trust R.S. Andrews for all of that. We'll see you back here tomorrow, 9:45 for our 1st and 15 on DawgNation.com, the DawgNation app, 10 a.m. across all other video platforms. For DawgNation Daily, presented by Meriwether Tharp. We'll look forward to talking to you then.